What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Week 7 DraftKings Breakdown. I'm Socrdave David Kitchen. Joining me, Geoff Ulrich, Andrew Wiggins, and Adam Levitan. Guys, how's it going today?
It's going well. Jerry hasn't eaten all week, but besides that, it's going well.
I did happen to see your recap on the playbook, Adam. I'm sorry. If it makes you feel any better, I had such a good team and feeling about the week until the primetime games on Sunday night and Monday night. Colossal letdown, but it is what it is. There's a new week, and the Thursday night game is an ugly one. Seattle at San Francisco. Geoff, I'll start with you as far as you get the ugly game to start out.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, Seahawks and the 49ers. 49ers, I don't know. They've been playing pretty well the last couple of games, but you really have to kind of look at their opponents, don't you? I mean, who did they play? Baltimore and the Giants. Not a couple of great passing defenses there. I'm not really one for Colin Kaepernick, and I don't really trust him coming off of 2 games against such soft opponents. So I'm not really interested in anyone from San Francisco, that's for sure. I guess you could maybe look at Torrey Smith as like a long shot GPP play. He's going to get Kerry Williams in coverage, but again, not really interested. I do think there's some value in rostering Russell Wilson in this game, though. 6,500. The San Francisco pass defense isn't good. Wilson, sort of came alive with Jimmy Graham last week. I think that's a stack that's got some merit. Seattle 2-4 now. There's got to be a little bit of a narrative streak going on here with just them needing a win. I think you could definitely see Wilson break out in this game. He's got the motivation. It's still a bit of a risk, but I do kind of like Russell Wilson as a play for Thursday night.
Okay, yeah, I think he's for most of these guys, I think they're GPP plays. However, the tight end position, we'll talk about this later, is so thin that if you wanted to use Graham as a cash game quarterback in your Thursday night lineups, I wouldn't argue it, especially with sort of soft pricing this week. All right, the next game is a game that's not going to be in the Sunday slate, but it will be in the Thursday slate. Adam, I'll let you tackle us. Buffalo at Jacksonville.
Yeah, no thank you. I mean, I don't know. Allen Robinson is probably a good bet for 10 to 12 targets. I think given the way he's been used and given that teams when they face Buffalo, they throw at a higher rate than against any other team in the league. But the corner duo for Buffalo is still good with Darby and Gilmore, and Robinson's price has crept up just a little bit. So if I'm playing the slate, I'm probably ignoring this game. But Allen Robinson and Julius Thomas, I think, are okay for tournaments.
Andrew, what about Bortles as a quarterback? Really cheap, and I can't believe that Bortles is one of the most consistent guys we've seen this season.
Yeah, Adam's always joking about how the algorithm on DraftKings is broken with Andy Dalton, and it seems kind of the case with Bortles, not to as much of an extent, but he's just too cheap given the production he's had. And every game that they're behind, they're throwing a lot. They should be behind again in this game. I like him a pretty good amount for 5,400. There's a little bit of risk there because Buffalo is a good defense, but people have been throwing on him, so I don't mind it at all.
Yeah, this game could be close. I mean, no Harvin, no Watkins, no Ty God. It might not be a blowout for the Bills.
Yeah. All right, let's move forward to Tampa Bay at Washington. Adam, we'll start with you again as far as what you think of this game, especially on the Tampa Bay side with their running game.
Yeah, I think it's a bounce back spot for the Redskins defense. I know they got kind of embarrassed by Chris Ivory last week on the road. I think they come home and kind of get their act together defensively. I've never been a Doug Martin guy, and that certainly cost me a couple times this year, but I think Doug Martin kind of gets swallowed up in this spot. I'd be more likely to attack this Redskins defense with Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans, given that I think the Redskins are going to be winning this game, and I think that their corners and secondary are so poor that Vincent and Mike Evans can kind of get on top of them. The only other play I like on the other side is Jordan Reed coming off concussion, says he's going to play 100%. Before he went down, he was on pace for 134 targets, which is 4 more than Rob Gronkowski led the league among tight ends with last year. So we know how big a part Jordan Reed is of this offense, how much Kirk Cousins likes throwing to him. I just wish Jordan Reed was in that 2,800 to 3,200 range, not the 4,200 range.
Geoff, your thoughts on Doug Martin at 4,900? You think we'll probably pass on him?
I don't know. I was kind of contemplating this move because I do think like the Redskins, they've gotten blown up by the run in the past 2 games, and Tampa Bay only threw 19 times last game. I can't see them wanting to let Jameis Winston throw much in the future, considering how he started in the league. I really like the spot for the Redskins D, though. I do agree with Adam. But as far as Doug Martin goes, I think he's been running great this year. I think he's looked great. At 4,900, I'm actually pretty interested in him because, Washington has been decimated by the run the last 2 weeks. So I think it could keep it going. I think Tampa's going to go run heavy. He's more of a GPP play for me than a cash game, I think. But there's definitely some upside there for sure.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. All right, Atlanta at Tennessee. Andrew, there's a guy named Devonta Freeman who his price keeps on going up, and yet he still seems like a must play.
Yeah, well, he's looked incredible. I think people were maybe ragging on him a bit just because coming into the season, they were saying that he wasn't going to be the lead back, but every indication is there that he's going to continue to produce, and they're going to continue to give him touches. I think there's a chance that Coleman dips into a few carries, but I'm not overly concerned, especially with how much Freeman's involved in the passing game, which is so key on DraftKings with the full point PPR. I'm going to be locking and loading Freeman this week. As far as other plays, like Julio's probably going a little bit under the radar now. He has 10 days off, says he's 100% healthy, was not even listed on the practice report yesterday. So he's a guy that a couple weeks ago was going like 30, 40% owned in GPPs and burned a few people. He's still got that same upside, so I like him a lot for tournaments.
Adam?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to be on DeAndre Hopkins, and then I think Julio has just the same, if not better, of a projection than DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, Julio is a total beast facing a secondary that's played well this year, but still is severely lacking talent at the corner position. So I think it's a great spot to use Julio in tournaments. And yeah, I think Devonta Freeman is like appropriately priced now, like he's not a bargain anymore, but he's appropriately priced for a guy who gets all the goal line work and all the pass down work. It's really hard for me not to use Devonta Freeman also.
Geoff, on the other side, Delaney Walker as a tight end option, really cheap. Do you have to go cheap at tight end?
I don't think you have to go cheap. There's some little bit more expensive tight ends that we can talk about later in the show that are probably going to be pretty popular this week. But Walker, I like Walker. He's an athletic tight end, gets lots of yards after the catch, and Atlanta's been giving it up to the tight end. I mean, they just let 34-year-old Ben Watson go absolutely nuts last week. Walker's been getting pretty much the most targets over the last couple games for Tennessee. Zach Mettenberger probably going to rely on Walker a lot in this game. I think he's a great choice at tight end this week.
Yeah, we saw last season Mettenberger and the Walker connection. I think it's there too. But I'm not going to do anything until I get the tight end whisperer, Andrew Wiggins, to confirm.
No, I like Delaney Walker a lot this week. I think it's difficult to play him in cash with Antonio Gates, not that much more expensive. Gates has just been phenomenal, and he's in a great spot against Oakland. But I like Walker a lot, and you can maybe even consider playing 2 tight ends.
We have seen it in the past, and we have seen it be a successful strategy as well this season just because of the depressed pricing. If Mettenberger does play, Adam, are you considering him at all? We've seen how paying up for quarterbacks sometimes comes back to bite you.
Yeah, and I love to play the bottom barrel quarterbacks. I just think that the upside on Rivers and Carson Palmer for 1,500 more is just too much to ignore. Like if Carson and Rivers were like 8,500 or 8,000, it would be a big difference than where they're at now, which is I think 67 and 65. So just not enough of a gap there for me to really consider Mettenberger.
Especially with how low price some of these running backs are. I think that you definitely can find a 2v2 where a $1,200 switch on a position, a skill player, you could definitely fit in Rivers or Palmer. I agree with there. All right, let's move on to the next game. New Orleans at Indy. And Geoff, it seems like we're talking pre-show. It seems like there's 3 teams that the wide receivers they've got 2 wide receivers or more, and that is the Cardinals, the Jets, and the Colts. with two guys that I'm not sure which ones to use, and this is the situation in Indy right now.
Yeah, Dante Moncrief and T.Y. Hilton both produced last week. Hilton's still been getting a few more targets, but really it's actually evened out this year where, Moncrief is basically matching Hilton, not only in targeting, but also in production. So in this game, the Saints, first of all, I mean, I really love targeting this game. I think that the Colts are going to come out and be, fairly motivated after sort of, I guess, blowing it with, the swinging gate not working play that happened last week. So I like targeting this game. But as far as Moncrief and Hilton go, Moncrief's probably going to get Brandon Browner in coverage. And right now he's probably the worst cover corner in the league. So I think that definitely lends itself to rostering Moncrief this week. He's also 5,300, and that's 1,200 less than Hilton, which is a big factor. I think for value-wise, Moncrief is the play. But I would say this, Luck Hilton in the past has gone off. I really like that stack for tournaments this week. Keenan Lewis is also a little bit banged up for the Saints. Came out this morning dealing with like a sports hernia injury. So that could be a factor in coverage. I like the Hilton Luck stack a lot.
All right, Andrew, what about you? Thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, Hilton's kind of the forgotten man. I think that especially with the discount, everyone's probably going to play Moncrief. Seems like a great game to target. Luck as well is a guy that I'm pretty sure is going to go under owned with some of the other options a little bit cheaper, namely Rivers and Palmer. So I like Luck a lot for tournaments. Hilton seems like the best pair, but can't really go wrong with Moncrief or Hilton. As far as cash games, I don't know, it's a little tough, like you're saying, to determine between the two of them, but I'd probably take the discount with Moncrief. As far as the other side, you got Willie Snead's in there. His price come up a little bit, but I think he's still going to be pretty heavily involved. I like him for only 4.3K. And that's probably the only guy I'm really considering from New Orleans. Maybe Breeze in some tournaments because I could see it being a shootout.
Yeah, Adam, as far as we had high hopes for Snead last weekend, was it just a situation where the Falcons were letting Ben Watson open everywhere?
I guess, yeah. I didn't see anything different about Willie Snead's usage. It's just sometimes that's the way things go. I do expect him to avoid Vontae Davis in coverage most of the time. I mean, the Saints kind of play their wide receivers all over the place. So we're going to see Snead in the slot maybe 30% of the time and Cooks in the slot 30% of the time. And then on the right side, about the same. So it's hard to tell, which makes Snead a little bit risky. But I do think that on the majority of Snead snaps, he'll avoid Vontae Davis. But the guy that I think is a great play for tournaments is Drew Brees, because everybody's going to be using Palmer and Rivers up at 25-30%. I think you can get Drew Brees, and you can also get Andrew Luck probably in the 10 to 12 or 8 to 12% range.
Yeah. Minnesota at Detroit. Adam, will stay with you as far as your thoughts on this Detroit squad that's won a lot of people money this week.
Right. So you needed to have the Stafford Calvin stack last week to win the money. And I think that's going to cause a lot of people to try to go back to it this week. I think that's a mistake. I mean, not only are their prices elevated a bit, but the matchup is way, way tougher. Xavier Rhodes has given Calvin Johnson a ton of problems in the past. It's just not as good of a spot. I mean, the Vikings defense is way, way different than the Bears defense. So I think it's a little bit of whack-a-mole people are going to play there with Stafford and Calvin. And that's not to say they won't perform their salary because Stafford is so cheap and Calvin is still underpriced, but I don't think it's going to be like a go ham spot again for that duo.
Andrew?
Yeah, on the other side, I agree with everything Adam said there. And for Minnesota, you got Stephon Diggs, who's been emerging over the past 2 weeks, and Charles Johnson might be back, but I'm not sure that it even matters. It seems like Diggs has passed him, and there's even some talk that Diggs is kind of the de facto number one, even ahead of Wallace now. Wallace is interesting at the same price because I do think if people are going to take one of the two, they're probably going to take Diggs just based on Wallace not having a good game last week. So Wallace I really like for tournaments. And then, of course, Peterson, who is coming off kind of a subpar game last week. I know he burned a lot of people, but it was a tough matchup against KC. This is a good spot for him to bounce back. He had 190 yards against Detroit when they met earlier this season. And he really kind of got unlucky with the with the touchdowns. I think he had one called back. He had one vultured. He didn't end up scoring, but it was a situation where if you played that game out 100 times, he's scoring 2 touchdowns, probably more than 50.
Yeah, would agree with that. Geoff, your final thoughts?
Just maybe think about Theo Riddick as like a really cheap value play. He's still getting like 50% of the snaps. Amir Abdullah keeps fumbling. So like Riddick's not going to get less snaps. I mean, I think he's almost an automatic for probably 5 catches again in this game. So at 3,400, I think he's really good value.
Yeah, I mean his projected range is probably around 12, 14 points, and at 3,400, the issue is like there's a lot of running backs that you could play, and so but he is a filler absolutely. If you're putting in a GPP lineup and you're using some expensive options, and you see that flex spot with 3,400 left, he would be probably one of the top guys that I would go with as well. All right. Pittsburgh at Kansas City. And this one is an interesting one. Adam, I'll start with you as far as your thoughts on this game.
Yeah, so we don't know Ben Roethlisberger's status. I'm going to assume that they're going to hold him out one more week and go with Landry Jones this week, which is confusing to me because Landry Jones obviously came in and played great in relief of a completely inept Michael Vick last week. But in every other opportunity Landry Jones has had, and they've all been preseason, but in every other opportunity he's had, he's looked like just a total train wreck. So as a preseason guy, it scares me when guys can't do it in the preseason. Now, in fairness to him, he didn't have Antonio Brown. He didn't have Le'Veon Bell. He didn't have Martavis Bryant when he was playing in the preseason. I guess I'm just concerned that him going to Arrowhead for this start, even though Kansas City has played awful pass defense this year, is just too tall a task for Landry Jones. That said, I find myself wanting to play Martavis Bryant at 4,700. I don't know. Can I play Martavis in cash if I don't like Landry Jones?
I think Martavis is really tempting because he is so flashy and the upside's there. If you take away that 88-yard touchdown at the end of the last game, he still had a nice game, but it's not nearly as good. That got him into the 100-yard bonus. And, of course, it was a monster play. But that's the thing with him. He can do that at any time. I do think it's a really tough spot for Landry on the road at Kansas City. I'm not particularly high on him. I'll go with the bigger sample size of what he did in the preseason versus what we saw last week. But I'm going to be keeping an eye on it, see what the team total comes out. Right now, they don't have a lineup for it because they're kind of waiting on Big Ben. But I'm a little bit scared to play Bryant. There's some cheaper options, like we talked about, Diggs and Snead, who are a little bit cheaper. I think probably safer for cash games. But, man, a lot of people are going to be on Martavis, and it's tempting for sure.
Yeah, and people are going to be chasing points from last week. So you have to figure out if you do fade him, like how heavily owned is he going to be? I do think if you go with the cheap quarterback and you want to get Le'Veon Bell in, Bell would be a guy that they would probably use to help out with Landry.
How sick was that touchdown he had, though? I mean, you don't see guys outrun entire defenses like that in the NFL. It's pretty amazing.
He had an extra gear there at the end. On the opposite side, any of you guys on Kelsey?
Yeah, I have no problem with Kelsey. I mean, with no Jamal Charles and Charkandrick looking so ineffective and Macklin possibly out of this game, you would think at least that Kelsey gets into the 7 to 9 target range. You would hope.
Yeah, I think the big issue is if Macklin does not play. He was out yesterday with a concussion, so if he does not play, then he would be a pretty good spot, especially if you're using a leverage play over Gates. All right, Cleveland at St. Louis, and there's one obvious guy here, and he might be 60 or 70% owned, Geoff.
Yeah, Nick Foles is probably going to be 60 or 70% No, I mean, Todd Gurley, 300 rushing yards versus the Cardinals and the Packers for two of the best run defenses in the league. And now he gets Cleveland, who is possibly the worst run defense in the league. There's not much to say except you need to consider him, and you better have a piece of him this week because I'm actually expecting like 200 yards. And I don't say that as like sarcastically. I think he's going to absolutely tear it up. And barring injury, he's going to be a massive play. So at 5,000, he's so much cheaper than some other workhorse running backs that, yeah, there's really no other side to look at. You just have to have a piece of him this week, in my opinion. As far as the Rams go too, maybe you can give some idea to like the Tavon Austin Rams D play. I think Josh McCown is definitely still a pick six waiting to happen. I think the Rams D is in play at home whenever they're at home. So I kind of like that play too if you're looking for like a different way to attack this game. But, Todd Gurley must play. Have to play him.
The question I think with Gurley is he's going to, like, how owned is he going to be? It's probably in the 60% range.
Yeah, for sure. He's going to be high owned, yeah.
And then from a tournament standpoint, it's like, even though he's a fantastic play, he's clearly the best play on the board for the week. Like, at what ownership does it become better to be fading him?
Must fade, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, man, because he's definitely a standout play, but is he that much better than Lamar Miller or Doug Martin? Like, those guys could absolutely outscore him. Like, if you ask yourself the question, if you took Doug Martin and Lamar Miller and I took Todd Gurley, like, which side do you want for who's going to score the most points? And it's kind of an interesting thought exercise, and I don't really know the answer, and I'm probably just going to play tons and tons of Gurley, but it's something to think about.
I think in a big tournament, Andrew, like I completely agree with you. I think there's merit to fading him. From a cash game perspective, though, I think you have to play him. But yeah, big tournament wise, I think that's a great strategy you brought up. Going with other cheap running backs because he is going to be like 40 or 50% owned. So I agree.
Well, and that's the thing as far as these big tournaments go. There's a strategy for every week, and sometimes fading the big play works. But last week, if you faded DeAndre Hopkins, you didn't win any tournaments, and he was an obvious play on DraftKings. So there are two schools of thoughts there, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I agree with you, Geoff, as far as the Rams, probably number one defense right now, 2,400 on DraftKings. Yeah. And I don't have a problem with the Rams Gurley stack at all. As far as this next game, Houston at Miami, Andrew, I'll let you just take it from here because you just talked about Lamar Miller. Yeah, I mean, Lamar Miller, a lot of people, there's the sharp guys were on him last week because there was talk he was going to get more touches. I wasn't completely sold. Unfortunately, I wasn't really on him. But I think he had 21 carries. So it seems like the new coaching regime is going to give him the touches that he should be getting. Coming into the year, he was going as like an RB1 or fringe, at the bottom of the RB1. So a lot of people thought he was going to do big things this year, and he's been really bad. But maybe now he's in the position to do that. It's a good matchup. The price is right. I think he's going to be a popular pick. It'll be interesting to see how Gurley impacts his ownership. But I like him a lot, and I think he's a cash game consideration as well as tournament. Definitely. Adam?
Yeah, I think the thing is, like, everybody's going to play Freeman and Gurley, and then, like, the flex is probably going to be Lamar Miller. So, like, if you want to be different, you can go – you don't have to, like, completely scratch all three of those guys. You could scratch, like, one of them, or you could scratch two of them, you know what I mean, and still stick with Gurley or still stick with Freeman or something like that. But yeah, I mean, Lamar Miller, you don't find running backs of his talent that you can project for 17 to 20 carries for 4,600 very often. So yeah, I definitely like Lamar Miller, and like Andrew, all the sharp guys were on Lamar Miller last week, which means me and Andrew weren't. So
you can throw me in that group too, if not paying.
He also could have had a much bigger day, but they kind of took him out towards the end of the game. Like it was garbage time, Adam.
Yeah, scoreboard induced, right?
Yeah.
And we always knew he's a talented guy. It's just like the old regime was like, oh, Lamar Miller has 15 carries. So, well, we got to take him out. And this new guy, Dan Campbell, like, he wants to, like, smash his face through, like, a brick wall or something. Like, he wants to run the ball at all costs. So it seems like at least he's going to be more committed to the run.
And on the opposite side, so there used to be this old site called Draft Street, which we're all familiar with, and Draft Street got purchased by DraftKings. You could play 4 running backs, and I really wish that was the case this week because there are a ton of running backs. Arian Foster is another guy that could catch a lot of passes, and you also got DeAndre Hopkins. And so people last week were concerned about the negative correlation, playing a running back and wide receiver from the same team. Andrew, your thoughts on that combo this week?
Yeah, I wish I had played them together more last week, and I did it some, but I don't worry about that as much in cash games. It's a bit of a concern with a team like them because maybe they just fall flat and don't score any points, and then you're in pretty big trouble having two pieces from their offense. However, everything is flowing through those two guys. So DeAndre Hopkins is almost like a running back with the amount – like the last 4 games he's averaging 16 targets, and the looks he's getting in the red zone and just everything, like – the volume is going to be there, and that's usually the advantage of taking a running back. So it's interesting to see just how much volume he's getting. You got to love him. He's going to be really heavily owned. He's been so good. And Foster's kind of the same way. He's highly involved in the passing game. He's getting a lot of carries. He hasn't been that effective on the ground the past 2 weeks. but I do think he's going to get it going. And I think they're both really high floor options this week.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Next game, the Jets at New England. Geoff, I'll let you tackle this as far as starting with the Jets wide receivers.
Yeah, this has some potential for the Jets wide receivers. The Jets are coming in as pretty big underdogs. I think it's up to 9 points right now. So there's probably going to be some passing, if not at the start. At the end, there's definitely going to probably be a lot of Jets passing. You have Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker, both elite wide receivers in my opinion, but there's a huge price difference between them again. So Decker's only $5,300. I believe that's about $2,500 cheaper than Marshall. With the Patriots' history of sort of trying to take away a team's top wide receiver, I really like Decker in this spot, and I love the savings. I think he could go semi-nuts in this game, just from the perspective of the Patriots, tend to hyper focus on one weapon, and Decker's got the talent to make them pay for that. So I'm not anticipating the Jets win this game, but I would see Decker having a big game. I really like him in the spot. I'm trying to find reasons not to play him, but I can't really find any.
Yeah, and then if you like Decker and Marshall, then Fitzmagic at a really, really, really low price, almost near minimum salary, is also in play. Adam, I want to get your thoughts as far as this game as a whole. I mean, you've got everybody on the Patriots last week, and now it seems like we're all off all of the Patriots pretty much.
Yeah, and that's what this Jets defense should do. I mean, I expect Darrelle Revis to shadow Julian Edelman. We've seen Darrelle Revis go into the slot this year. When they played the Dolphins, he followed Jarvis Landry into the slot. So I think that I'm not saying Edelman can't have a good game because he's so efficient on those short passes with Brady, but I do think that he's out of play given his price and some of the other options that are up there on DraftKings. Dion Lewis's price has come to the point where I don't really want to play him, even though I think this is a quote unquote Dion Lewis game. At 6,500, he is very expensive, but nobody's going to be on him after what he did to everybody last week. So I do think that for tournaments, Dion Lewis is a pretty interesting play. Obviously, you never catch me playing Brady in a million years. I didn't play him last week. I have no plans to play him ever again unless DraftKings completely changes their quarterback salary structure. Oh, and we should talk about Gronk because dude is like 8,100 and the other tight ends are like 3K. I mean, it's like he needs to have, I think somebody tweeted out today, he needs to have like 6 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown just to meet value. And that doesn't even take into account the relative value of the other tight ends like Gates for 5,000 and Delaney Walker for 3K or whatever. So I don't know. I know there's like a Gronk infatuation out there. Like you must play Gronk. I don't really know where that's coming from. And I'm not trying to be recency bias on that either. I know he hasn't played well, but even if he has 3 touchdowns this week, I'm not going to be on him.
Yeah, how much does the whole like Belichick take away the number one thing? How much of that is a narrative? How good's Malcolm Butler? Is that something? Because I've been thinking about that too, and I'm wondering especially with how good Marshall's been. Like, what are your thoughts on Marshall in that whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Andrew. I don't think that you can necessarily shut down Marshall completely. I just like the spot for Decker because I think he's just as good as Marshall, and I think he will get a little bit more room. So I don't think you can't play Marshall. And I probably should have prefaced my Decker love by saying that, but I just like Decker more is the way I said it. The other thing about this game is the Patriots are projected for like 28 points. So where are the points going to come from, do you guys think? Because someone has to score.
Keyshawn Martin.
Yeah, it's tough to say with the Patriots. That's the problem. You don't really know who's going to score. And I think Gronk will go under in tournaments, but I wouldn't touch him in cash.
Yeah. Gronk would be the typical flex spot to use because those, like you said, those other tight ends are just so money in that tight end spot. Yeah. I think the Gronkowski stuff came from last year, but if you see, like every week, his usage rate has gone down, and so that is concerning and a little bit like perplexing because he is just such an animal. So with everybody off him this week, expect him just to go nuts because that's kind of how things are, and then we'll say, "Oh, we're all idiots." So that's how it works. As far as the next game, Oakland at San Diego, you've got this San Diego offense that's just passing, and you don't think it's going to stop anytime soon, do you, Andrew?
No, and Antonio Gates, outside of Todd Gurley, will probably be the the second highest owned player on the slate. Everyone knows that Oakland struggled mightily against the tight ends this year, and Gates has been so good in his first 2 games back. I think we can expect him to have another big game. But we mentioned some other guys like Travis Kelce, who's $100 cheaper. Some of those plays are around the same price range that are just going to go way under-owned because everyone's going to gravitate to Gates. And all you need is for them to outscore Gates, and you've gained on a lot of the field. So I kind of like staying away from Gates in tournaments just for that reason. But man, is he a great play for cash games. And I'd keep an eye on the wide receivers. Keenan Allen's banged up. I think he's going to go, but there's some talk of him maybe not being as explosive. I'd be a little concerned about playing him. And then Stevie Johnson might be back in the fold, which kind of adds another wrinkle, and maybe that hurts Gates a little bit on some of those short routes that he's been having. But it's not going to scare me off Gates, but something to keep in mind.
Right,
Derek, go ahead.
You can only play one, Carson or Rivers. Who you got?
I would probably play Rivers, at least for cash, because the Arizona wide receivers are so cheap. So you can get some exposure with John. Well, they're not so cheap, but they're priced well given the situation. So you could look at playing Fitz or John Brown, and you wouldn't really want to pair them with Palmer and cash. So you could go Rivers there and balance it out a little bit.
It's definitely an interesting strategy and a good point, although I'll probably have Palmer. Adam, what about you?
Yeah, I think I like Rivers better. I think that they are less likely to be able to run the ball. And I think that although the stats say that the Ravens secondary is worse, I actually think that Oakland's secondary is worse. I mean, they picked up David Amerson, who's just a total train wreck off the street, and then they play him every snap. Like, this dude is just atrocious. They can't defend the pass whatsoever. And given that San Diego struggled to run the ball so much, I think that it's going to be another Rivers game. And with his weapons getting healthy, like Andrew talked about, with Stevie healthy and Keenan supposed to play, and Ladarius playing so well, and Gates playing so well, and Malcolm Floyd playing so well, and Woodhead playing well, it's like I don't see any way Oakland can hold Rivers under 300 yards.
Yeah, Geoff, what about Woodhead this week?
Well, Melvin Gordon keeps fumbling, so I think you could see probably a little bit of spike. I really like him in this game, actually. He's only 4,600. He's getting like 7 pass targets a game. He could see an uptick in carries now, too. And with what Adam was saying, Oakland's probably going to have a lot of trouble holding the San Diego offense back. You might see Woodhead get in the end zone a couple times, maybe with a couple short touchdowns. I think he's got sneaky upside in this game. I'm definitely going to target him in like a GPP or something this week. So I like that. And then on the other side, too, I just mentioned I kind of like Michael Crabtree in the spot. He's only 4,300. He's probably going to get Brandon Flowers in coverage, who's been awful. So on the other side of the ball, he's one of my favorite targets. It's also an RB on San Diego. On Oakland, we should probably talk about too.
You're talking about Mr. Murray? Yeah,
Latavius. So the Chargers run D, is probably up there with Cleveland right now in terms of badness. Murray 6,100. The only thing that worries me about him is game flow. I was thinking about him as a cash game play, but at 6,100, he's probably a little bit expensive for that. But he does have big game potential for this. San Diego cannot stop anyone on the ground. They just let James Starks run for over 100 yards. Murray's a lot more talented, a lot more big play ability. So I definitely think he's someone you have to consider this week.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many considerations, especially for GPPs. Just talking about just tournaments, like I could make so many different lineups with a lot of leverage, a lot of correlation plays, and we'll see how that works out this week. It should be a fun sweat Sunday night and Monday night. This Dallas New York Giants game, though, like Andrew, this was the game that week 1 we all had circled, and it just like was a huge dud. And now you've got the rematch, and there's not a lot of hype around compared to where it was week 1.
Yeah, you got a lot of injuries. Obviously, Romo's out. Doesn't sound like Dez is going to go. Odell Beckham probably still a bit banged up. He was pretty ineffective in the second half of last game, so that would concern me. The interesting tournament play is probably Christine Michael. I don't know. I really am having a tough time understanding if people are going to play him or not, but I think generally he's going to go pretty low owned. He's minimum. They're saying he's getting the first team reps. Like, I wouldn't count on 20 touches, but he's a pretty explosive guy, and if you get 10 to 15, you never know what he could do with it. So I'm not looking at a lot of plays in this game, but that might be the one for tournaments and cash games. I think you just avoid this game.
Yeah, Adam, I mean, you saw what I think Dunbar did week 3 for the Cowboys. Even if he just does that for minimum salary, like Christine Michael, I think a lot of people will overlook.
Right. So, I love these merit-based promotions. You know what I mean? Like that was the case with Willie Snead. It's not that they've had injuries to the running back stable in Dallas. It's that Kristen Michael, I'm sure, is just running circles around Joseph Randall at practice. And I think it speaks volumes that they went into the bye week. They said, hey, we're going to get Brandon Whedon out. We're going to put Castle in. We're going to get Ronald Leary out at left guard. We're going to put Lyle Collins in, and we're going to get Joseph Randall out. We're going to put Kristen Michael in. I know it's kind of like a running joke in the fantasy community that Kristen Michael isn't as good as his combine numbers suggest, and maybe that's the case, but this dude is just a total athletic freak. I think he'll get 12 to 15 carries. I can't say he's going to catch the ball because that's one of the reasons he never played in Seattle. He struggled with the protections. He struggled with route running. He struggled with the mental side of the game, but just turn around and hand it to him 12 to 15 times with this offensive line. I think he'll pay off the 3K with upside for a lot more.
You're the Dallas Cowboys defense whisperer, Adam. So your thoughts on this Cowboys D this week?
I never get them right. I think without Dez and without Romo and without DeMarco, they can't play keep away, and that exposes them on a per play basis. Like even last year, their yards allowed per play were among the worst in the league. It was just like they were a good defense because nobody ran plays against them. But now that they go 3 and out all the time because they have none of their players, it's a totally different scenario. So I don't have a problem with Beckham if we can find out that he's healthy. I don't have a problem with Eli either.
Yeah, Geoff, as far as Beckham and Eli especially, that Donnell play last week really hurt him, and then it kind of spiraled downward from there. But Philly's got a good defense. Your thoughts about Eli this week?
I don't like him this week either. I think Greg Hardy adds an element to the Dallas D that is going to see Eli under pressure again. I think I haven't really, outside of one game, what has Eli really done this year? I was kind of looking at it, and he hasn't done much. He's averaged 15 points 15 points per game on DraftKings if you take out that San Francisco game. I don't like the spot at all. I actually think Dallas might upset them here. I really like the changes they made on the bye week. I don't like the spot for Eli, and I'm not that high on Beckham this week. He could always break out, so I never cross him out completely, but he's a little banged up too.
Philly at Carolina, and this game is going to be the Sunday night game, and kind of an ugly one. But I do think I've been a big fan of Cam Newton this year. I do think that if there is a leverage play to the Rivers and Palmer play, it is Cam. He's just been really good. You saw what he did against Seattle last week. He's going to be at home against Philly this week. There should be a lot of different plays. So, Andrew, we'll start with you as far as your thoughts on this game in general.
Yeah, I mean, Cam sure has played well this year, and he kind of just goes under the radar a little bit. You don't hear him being mentioned a lot. You're right. He's at that price point where I think Rivers and Palmer are really going to price block him, given that they're the same price or $100 cheaper. He's going to go way under owned. And he's one of those guys that is just always a great GPP play because of what he does on the ground, because of how many rushing attempts he has in the red zone. I do think that they could struggle to run the ball. Philly's got a really nice run defense, so that might lead to him rolling out some more. It might lead to him passing a little bit more. I think that he's a really, really nice GPP play. Question is, who do you pair him with? Probably Greg Olsen. The receivers can't really be trusted. But you could always run him naked as well because of that running upside that he has.
A naked Cam Newton, that's probably what I will be doing in some tournaments. Adam, as far as the Philadelphia side, just tell everybody, just don't do it.
Jordan Matthews, baby.
Yeah, so look, you can get Jordan Matthews at 1%, and he's not going to be covered by Josh Norman. That's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to leave it right there. He's not going to be covered by Josh Norman, and he's going to be 1%.
Oh, gosh. Don't even leave that possibility for him to be open, basically. Baltimore at Arizona, though, in this game is going to be a really fun game. You've got 3 wide receivers on the Arizona side. You've got Smith and Forsett on the opposite side. Maybe, I don't know, maybe even a tight end there somewhere. So there's going to be a lot of scoring. I think every time we say this on Monday night, it doesn't happen, but I think there's going to be a lot of scoring. Geoff, tell me you agree.
Yeah, I do agree, and I think most of the scoring is going to be done by Arizona. I think this is going to be kind of a statement game. They're getting the Baltimore Ravens, who they just look uninspired every week to me. At wide receiver, you have Fitzgerald, but now you also have John Brown, who's out-targeted Fitzgerald in 2 of the last 3 games. You're getting pretty big savings by going Brown over Fitzgerald at 5,500. I'm not sure if I would do it in cash games because I think Fitzgerald is still safer, but you really have to consider it. That's a lot of money that you're saving. That offers you a lot of flexibility if you do go with Brown. So, and then you have to throw Michael Floyd into the mix, who I think is a great GPP target this week. He's only 3,200. He's been getting targeted. He's been getting, somewhere in the realm of 7 targets a game the last 3 weeks. And he gets a lot of deep targets. So he gets targeted in the end zone a lot. I like Floyd a lot in this game. And we were kind of joking before that, this might be the game where Floyd catches like 2 or 3 touchdowns and Fitzgerald and Brown don't do anything. But I was kind of semi-serious when I said it because, Floyd does have that potential. So, yeah, there's a lot of places to go on the Cardinals offense. And we haven't even talked about Carson Palmer, who's probably the safest or one of the safest QB plays this week too.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to justify using anybody other than Palmer and Rivers this week, especially for cash games. Yeah. But last week, as someone who had John Brown and Larry Fitzgerald different places, it was really frustrating to see all the love that Floyd was getting, Andrew.
Yeah. Well, you knew it was coming at some point. He was banged up to start the year. It seems like he's healthy now. So I'm not surprised that they're getting him more involved in that. That's going to take some targets away from Fitz. But Fitz, he's been catching like every week you'll see his line. It's like 8 catches on 9 targets. Like, guy's a machine. So he's probably my favorite play of all. He's just so safe. Like, what's his floor in this game? Like 7 for 75 or something. I know it's clearly lower than that, but it sure feels like that might be it. And then on the other side, it's like Steve Smith. What's to say about Steve? He's still playing at an incredibly high level. It's a very difficult matchup. Patrick Peterson's been playing really well, but I think in tournaments, maybe this game could become a bit of a shootout, and he'll probably go under own just because of the matchup. So I kind of like him too.
You should see the face that Adam just made. Steve Smith. Adam, go ahead. I'll let you.
Look at that chip on Steve Smith's shoulder. He's so tough. Oh, look at him. I
don't know how you can hate Steve Smith, man.
Smith is the best.
Hate Steve Smith.
He doesn't like guys with moxie, but the point still stands that especially if Arizona scores a lot, like someone's got to catch those passes, and it's not going to be all Crockett Gilmore.
Patrick Peterson and Tyrann Mathieu are going to put 36-year-old Steve Smith in his place, which should be on the sideline in a wheelchair.
Wow. All right. Your thoughts on the Arizona side before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I'm thinking about playing Michael Floyd in cash, so Jerry's probably not going to eat again this week.
It's going to be that's the thing. I really feel like with some of these teams that have 2 skill players that are going, it's going to be just a matter of like getting them all right. Basically picking the one that goes off, or maybe fading them both altogether. So this week will be interesting. Monday night should be fun on the Sweat Show, though, with so many different options. I expect basically the final leaderboard, like in the last minute, to have minutes remaining of the top 10. Like, I think it's going to come down to just one specific player doing something. So that is what I'm hoping for the Monday Night Sweat Show. You can catch that at the start of the Monday night game on DraftKings TV. But guys, I appreciate you all being with us. Andrew Wiggins, Geoff Ulrich, and Adam Levitan. You can catch Adam's The Daily Fantasy Edge podcast. Football somewhere in there in the title. You can catch that podcast on iTunes, one of the top iTunes podcasts each and every week. They do a great job. And thanks for watching, guys. I'll do one last thing, though. If you had to target one game, what's it going to be, Geoff?
New Orleans, Indy.
Adam.
Well, last week I said Bears, Lions. I want to go off the radar again, but I can't do it. I will go Ravens, Cardinals.
Andrew?
I'll say Oakland, San Diego.
I'll say Jets at New England, just to be, and we totally leave out Baltimore and Arizona, but that should be probably the obvious one. But we're all going contrarian, and that's okay. Thanks for joining us for the Week 7 matchup breakdown. I'm David Kitchen. We'll see you next time.